So I'm here today with Dane Duggan, CEO of Autism New Zealand. Welcome to the show, Dane. It's good to see you.
Well, thank you, Blake. Nice to see you again as well, and thank you for having me.
I've got Paul here with me today.
Howdy.
Hey, Paul.
So, first question, Dane, how have you been affected by the cuts in your organisation that were on March?
So I guess we haven't had too many cuts as an organisation just yet. Funding's pretty tough to come by. Most of our government contracts have continued at this stage. We're still waiting to hear from a couple. The challenge we've probably faced more from an organisational funding standpoint has been the time it takes to get certain contracts rolled over or confirmed. So sometimes they've sort of rolled over into when sort of a month or two into when the contract period is supposed to start, which then obviously means we've got to cover that cost in the meantime, which creates some challenges. But it's certainly a tough environment out there. We've been, I guess, lucky in some respects that, I think the government see the good work that we do, and hopefully that will continue, but we're still waiting to hear back from one of our big contracts. Some of our other sort of smaller ones as well, they're coming back slightly less than what they may have been in the future. So yeah, it's a tough environment, but not just government. It's also our other funding streams have become really tight as well. So historically, when we've been getting a good chunk of money from the likes of the lotteries, for example, that's come down quite significantly this year. So, and we're a national organisation that's growing. So we've got 64 staff around the country now. So it's it's a challenge. Our main job is to find $4 million or so a year to make sure that we survive as an organisation. That's not to say there's other challenges, obviously, within the disability support system, which I'm sure we'll get to, Blake, shortly.
Yeah. And so what was your initial reaction to the March 18th cut?
Surprise, shock. They to be able to just announce changes to way people could spend their funding overnight was a surprise and has been really, really hurtful and confusing for our autistic and wider autism community. And the limitations that the government at the time put on had a massive impact on our autistic community. If I take a step back, Blake, as well, the autistic community is the largest group of people who are funded through disability support services. So I think it's 36% of people who get disability support funding have a diagnosis of autism or are autistic. And so they are the largest cohort of people, and they were the ones that were affected the most, purely because it's not like with most of our community, you can't see what they need. So there has to be an understanding of autism to understand what that funding for them looks like and provide them the flexibility to get the support they need. So it was shock, came out of nowhere really. And the government have assured us it's not a cut. It's purely a tightening on how they will spend it. We've had a couple of meetings with ministers and whatnot now. So we'll take them at their word for that. And hopefully through this process, we'll see that we will be able to input into what that funding is able to be used for, because that's really the big kicker here is how can people use and utilize their allocated funding to best support themselves.
So you had met with the minister, is what you're saying?
Yeah, relatively recently. And I'd say it was a productive meeting. She pushed us mostly onto Chris Bunny, who's doing the disability support review operational work. And we have since met with the team who are doing that review, and they were really receptive, we have to say. And there's a process they go through now, and it's like an 18-month process, really. Probably about a 12-month process now to get to a point where there'll be final recommendations that are made to cabinet mid next year around what their funding should look like. I will say this: one, I'm coming at this from a place where the disability sector is severely underfunded. So there needs to be more funding in there. So don't get me wrong. Everything I'm saying right now is based on the fact of knowing that there needs to be more funding put into the system. It's been made pretty clear to us that at this point in time, there is no more money to be put into the system. So now we're working on, okay, well, within those constraints, what feedback do we need to provide to make sure our autistic community is getting the best outcomes out of the funding that they receive?
Paul, I'll let you ask a couple of questions if you have any.
Well, one of the things I'm really curious about, Dane, is a big nationwide organization. What does that funding go towards? What services do you guys provide the autistic community? And
Sure.
how, if you have to make cuts, how do you go about prioritizing what it is that you need to cut?
Yep. So as it sits now, we haven't had to make any cuts as an organisation.
Yep.
So we're very lucky in that respect. In fact, we're growing.
Touch
So
wood. Yep.
we actually touch wood. Exactly. You got to be very careful what you say these days. But right now we've actually grown significantly. So we actually need more support in that space. So we've actually just gone through a restructure where we actually are providing more support for our service delivery team. So back to what you've just said, though, our main service. So we've got two key service delivery areas. So as an organisation, we've got 16 branches around the country, and they provide outreach support, and that could be different on any day, depending on the need of the person. We kind of find in a lot of cases, we may have an initial conversation with somebody that will be really, really long and in depth and provide them some significant support, and they may not hear from them again for a while, versus really helping and being intimately involved in someone's life for a period of time to ensure they're getting the supports that they need, or providing them strategies to help with them or their loved ones. That's one. Two is education. So we have the government contract, the one I was referring to before, which we don't know whether that'll be renewed yet or not. We're confident it will, but we have the government contract for autism teacher training, and we take a teams-based approach to that. So there has to be both a teacher and an educator or someone from the school and a family member involved in that course. It's a 2-day course called Tilting the Seesaw for Teams. Really, we get really positive feedback about that. We also run our community programs that we've developed over the years through our amazing education team. So we've got FANS, which is Framework for Autism in New Zealand, and Way to Play, which is a tool or a course designed to help family whānau, teachers, educators understand how best interact with their loved one through play. So they're we've been around since 1969, I think it is, and they're sort of grown as our two key service delivery areas. And Blake will know this, if you go back to the autism guidelines from 2009, the best way to help and support our community is to provide education and support and create awareness and the best environment for them. We also, though, have noted it's all well and good to try to connect people to support, but if there's not a great level of support available in certain areas, it's really hard to make those connections. So over the last sort of 4 to 5 years, and I think Blake, last time we spoke, we've probably moved a bit in this space. We deliver our early support program out of Auckland, and we're about to take over or pick one up in Wellington as well. So there's now a pathway for people. We also do diagnosis in Wellington because getting diagnosed in this country is really difficult, and we focus in on really, really young, because autistic traits start to show as early as 12 months. And also adults, because in this country it's really difficult for an adult to get diagnosed. That's just in Wellington, unfortunately. We'd love to roll that out around the country, but it's a funding issue. And we also do employment and transition for adults. So we've placed or helped place about 150, 160 autistic adults now in the last few years into employment. They're perfectly capable of being in employment. It's just trying to make sure that they understand the environment they're getting into. And we've got a stickability rate or retention rate, I think it's about 87% or 89%. So I'm quite proud of that we don't try to put a square peg in a round hole. We try to get the right fit and make it work. So we do quite a lot. Your question is, thankfully, we haven't had to look to cut right now. But obviously, if anything's tagged to a government contract and that government contract doesn't happen, then you need to consider what that looks like moving forward. We probably have enough demand for our services now anyway to be able to sustain a little bit of a cut in that area, which is nice, but it's just it's a challenge. But what we are, and sorry, I'll talk a lot, but just tell me to stop if you want me to. We're just also moving into housing, so something else for adults that's been around. I've been in the job for about 11 years, 12 years now, and it hasn't changed what's going to happen to my son or daughter when I'm not around to look after them anymore. So we've just become a community housing provider through a separate organisation, the Autism Charitable Trust, which is linked to Autism New Zealand, but it's a separate entity. And we are looking to build neurodiverse friendly properties and get people in there and provide them a greater level of support than they're currently getting. And also hopefully an equity stake as we move forward in that as well, to help them live an independent life.
The conversations you had with the minister that you mentioned, autism is largely a sort of unseen disability, because there's not very much in the way of physical characteristics that people can use to identify it from a distance. Is that part of the conversations that you've had with the government educational about that, and or are they relatively aware of what the nuance is there within the situations that are popping up?
I think they're relatively aware from a high level. I think from when we spoke to the people, it was last week, who were doing the disability review, as I said, who were really receptive. We did use the example of, so if someone comes in, and I'm absolutely not minimizing this at all, so don't get me wrong, this is just an example. If somebody walks in or comes in to be assessed who has a physical disability, 9 times out of 10, you can kind of see what you need to do. It's also not as easy as that always, but you can see. So if they have trouble showering, for example, you can put the right supports in place to make sure that person can shower. For our community, someone might not shower because it's a sensory overload issue, or the steam, or the noise, or whatever, and you can't see that. You can't see what you need to do for that person, and there is a bit of a lack of understanding at times with that. People think, well, why don't they just go shower? So, for us, there is that education piece and awareness piece around showing that, look, it's not that they won't shower, it's that they literally can't. So how do we get the supports in place to help this person go and do that? How do we get the supports in place to remind that person to go brush their teeth? Or all those other sort of executive functioning skills that we kind of take for granted a little bit. So again, it's not downplaying at all the physical disability side of it. There's obviously a need for support there. It's just the differences in how those needs need to be assessed, we think. And also with our community, sorry, Paul, those needs can change over time too. So the needs for that person now could be completely different in 6 months' time or a year's time. And we kind of are trying to articulate that as well to the people who are doing the review, that flexibility within the support they get is really important, because that need can change.
Were they responsive? I'm guessing you gave them feedback about that announcement in March, about how that quick change impacted the people that you work with. How responsive were they to that feedback?
So we gave that feedback back in March and April as well. So that we gave a lot of feedback. We did quite a bit of media on that, and they were, I would say, quite. So both from a government level and from a whaikaha level, they were quite. In fact, we got apologies. So I think they understood that it wasn't done very well. Still befuddles me sometimes how they thought it was a good idea at all to announce something without any consultation and then announce it the day of essentially it being implemented, or the next day. And again, it was our community that had the biggest impact from that. Because, for example, if you need to buy like a sensory tool or something like that, there's these chew necklaces, right? We see people with those. You can chew through those in a week. So you might need to buy one of those a fortnight, one of those a week. But part of the rules were you can only buy them once a year or once through your term. So it just didn't make any sense. And as I said before, the need can change. So there's no point also buying 12 months worth of them if in 6 months' time it could be a fidget spinner that's going to help you or whatever. The needs change. So for us, that flexibility was really important. We didn't like the way it was announced, or the way that it was portraying carers as taking advantage of the funding. That was just not the case. And my argument back is, look, if you being the government or the process or the systems that you have in place have allowed people to use their respite funding for things that you don't think is fine, well, that's more of a system issue. It's not a person issue. And also you're taking that from, maybe there could be 1 or 2 stories of that, but 99.9% of the people who get this funding are appreciative of it and are using it as best they can to support their loved one. So to make villains of carers as well, and some of the media and some of the rhetoric that came out was quite upsetting for our community too. So all that stuff was communicated. As I said, we did get an apology, and then there was changes from there, obviously, with the new minister, and then a change with the disability support not running through whaikaha and running through Ministry of Social Development now, which has caused a bit of angst as well. I guess I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, sorry, Paul, but it's the change has been concerning, and the lack of clarity, I guess, is one thing we've been hammering home with both the minister and the team, that this lack of clarity has really caused hurt and harm within our autistic community, and it's just not fair.
How does it make you feel that the minister is in the House quite often most days saying there haven't been freezers, there's not freezers, there's not this, not that, when clearly as an organisation that also implements presidential funding now, it's clearly noticeable? How does that make you feel as a CEO of a major company?
Yeah, we just want the honesty, right? So if they're going to make cuts, make cuts. Don't try to hide them behind veiled other areas of trying to make cuts subtly. If they're doing that, and look, if I was to put my cynical hat on, it certainly looks that way, Blake. That they're making it harder for people to actually use the funding that they've got, which means that will probably be a cut later on because they haven't used it this year, which means it might go down next year, which is a real concern. They are telling me that they haven't cut it, but what they are saying is, from a government in general, is that yes, there's a budget now, and they want NASCs to stick to those budgets. So the only way you can do that is, one, if you decrease the level of funding on people; two, decrease the number of people you fund; or three, increase your budget. That's the only real way you can do that. And they've said they're not increasing the budget. So clearly, there's only two other options there. And so I guess so. It makes me, Blake, it's been an angry, upsetting, frustrating 6 months as a CEO of a organisation that supports the autistic and wider neurodiverse community. We only met the minister last month. Now, that meeting went well. I have no criticisms about the meeting whatsoever. But the reality is, they're saying they're not cutting. They're probably not cutting, but they're certainly not going to increase it. And if there's already been an overspend, there's only one way to fix that, and that is to cut. So the proof will be in the pudding, I guess. But if they need to cut, they should just tell us they're cutting, right? And then we will know that, and then we can work with what that looks like. There's two different parts to this, right? The one is the communication around it. So tell us what's actually going on, so we can then give clear, simple messaging to our community that's easy to understand. And then if you are cutting, then we can look at what that looks like for our community and advocate for that. Advocate for not cutting. So, if you understand what I mean, there's two things there. So for us, it's more about just be upfront and honest about what you're doing. And then we can look at what that looks like for our community afterwards and what we feel like needs to change.
Even though they're still, it's still very vague, and they are consultating a little bit more than they have been, are you satisfied with the amount of consultation? Because me, as a fellow autistic person, I am certainly not. Although I appreciate the improvement, it's certainly not where I would like.
No, I'm not satisfied with the amount of consultation that's gone on in the past. I think, going back to the earlier point around that announcement in March, that was done without any consultation at all. So there was none. Two, the review that came out of those recommendations that you would have seen, Blake, recently, there was no real consultation on that. I did hear the minister did talk to more families and people than probably what she was given credit for, but certainly we weren't talked to, and given or any other autism organisation, as I understand it, wasn't spoken to in that process. And for us, that was a bit frustrating, because given we're the biggest cohort of people, we wanted to make sure that the voice was heard. It seems now that it's getting better. So I'll reserve judgment on the future on that, Blake, I guess. But the past and historically, no, it hasn't been good. It hasn't been good enough. Like, this is we're dealing with people's lives here, and there needs to be more consultation in that.
Anything else from you, Paul?
I'm kind of curious about peripheral cuts, because obviously funding for organizations directly is one thing, but we're seeing what feel like real world cuts to, say, the health sector, for example, where they're not increasing the budget at the rate of inflation. So essentially it's a cut. And you've got the commissioner sitting there going, oh, we have to slim everything back, and you might not get toast after you have a baby. How do those sort of peripheral service cuts impact the people that you work with?
Yeah, so we have presented to two select committees, one of them being the Social Services and Community Select Committee. So we had, I think, half an hour for that one. That went really well, and we're talking about a bit, because the very nature of autism means it goes across virtually every government department, right? Whether it be education, health, social development, as you get into adulthood, other areas as well. So those cuts have an impact as well. Clearly, doesn't matter what space you're in, it touches our community in one way or another. Our argument is we could provide a far better systemic model that could actually help our community, that takes a lot of those sort of silos out, where you can have. We know that we can identify autism as early as 12 months. We know there's accurate tools out there. So if funding, can you still see me? I went, sorry, hopefully you still hear me. If funding is tight, which it is, and we're the first to acknowledge, you've got to live within a budget, right? So we understand that funding's tight. So if that's the case, let's have a look and see how we can do things better. That's not going to cost more, because I think we can do things far better in a system. So, and that can take out some of the issues you just raised, Paul. So we know we can smooth this journey for our community so much better. We can identify as early as 12 months. There's a tool out there that's, for every 100 kids you identify, I think it's 89 will go on to get an autism diagnosis. and 11 will go on and get a diagnosis of something else, whether it be a learning delay or a speech delay or something like that. So it's 100% accurate in picking up something as early as 12 months. Then refer them on to get a diagnosis, if that's still important in the journey, which it currently is. Fund us to do it, or fund an organization who knows how to do it. Do it in a way that's going to be better. If you fund us a small amount of money here, you're going to save billions of dollars down the track, and you're going to give these people a better quality of life, which is the most important thing. And then thirdly, all well and good to do that, but you need to go into early support. So why can't we have early support around the country? Why can't there be a smooth journey that just goes from pick up this child through Plunkett or through wherever. Plunkett have been really good, by the way. We've trained up about 1,000 or close to 1,000 of them in this tool called Mosaic, which is really cool. Then refer them to diagnosis, so you don't need to go through the GP system or anything like that. It's absolutely not a criticism of GPs at all, but they're bogged down and busy, so we can take that referral out. This tool can pick it up at Plunkett, refer them to Autism New Zealand or whoever, it doesn't really matter, the place that does the diagnosis. Then we can assess their needs really quickly after that. Then we can get them into the right program to help support them. So when they hit school age, they need less support already, and they're on a whole different trajectory that they can have a better quality of life, these people. So it's not, so yes, the cuts have an impact. Our argument always like to try to go on with a solution. So we understand budgets are tight. We've all got to live within our budgets, right? We've got a household budget. You have to live within that. So let's look at a better way of doing this. If there's no more money, we're still advocating for more money, don't get me wrong. But if there's no more money, let's look at a better system to see how we can do this differently. Like why? Because, for example, our employment program, I don't understand why we can't do it in Christchurch or Dunedin, or why we can't have more people in Wellington. It's capped at a certain level. So, and we don't even get any funding for that until we actually start working with people, and then the real funding sort of kicks in when they actually start to get a job, get interviews and that type of stuff. So again, I feel like it's a no-brainer that could be funded around the country. We've got a proven track record now that, because we know autism and autism-specific supports are really important. Why can't we do it in Christchurch? Why are we limited to Auckland and Wellington? Why are we limited to only 40 people a year or whatever it is? Why can't we do more? Because we could do more, and we could help more people, and we could help them into jobs if that's what they want to do. So we're not forcing people down that path. If that's what they want to do, then we have the ability to support them in that. So yes, the cuts have an impact, but let's look at solutions as well and see how we can provide a better solution for this.
My final question to you is what would your message be to the minister, because we are trying to get her to appear on this program, because she has been not willing to appear on much media throughout this time. So I'd like to give you a few minutes for you to hit the floor and encourage why the minister should come on a program like this.
Thanks, Blake. So one, my message to the minister is, I believe you're trying to do the best you can, and I believe that you want the best for our community, but you don't know what the best for the community is until you actually talk to the community, and that's really important. So we need to be more in consultation with the ministers, with their people who are doing the reviews. We need to make sure there's constant communication. We need to make sure that how that stuff is communicated, all the information is in a format that's easy to understand and easy to read for our community and understandable. And to be able to get when I met you, when we got to meet the minister, I felt like she does really care about our community. So if she can get onto these platforms and talk about that, I think it'll come across that she does care. They want to do a few things really, really well, which is fine, as long as those few things that you're doing really well has a positive impact on our communities.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming on the show. Dane, pleasure to see you.
Nice to see you, Blake. Sorry it's taken a while to catch up, but we'll catch up soon. Nice to see you, Paul, too. Nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you. Thank you.